When I first moved into my new apartment, it felt like a dream come true. A quaint, two-bedroom unit in a quiet neighborhood, it was the perfect place for a fresh start. The only thing that gave me pause was the attic. It had one of those pull-down ladders, and something about it just felt off. One night, a few weeks after moving in, I was home alone. My roommate, Liz, was out of town visiting family. It was around midnight, and I was curled up on the couch watching a movie when I heard a soft thud from above. My heart skipped a beat. I paused the movie and strained to listen. Another thud, followed by a faint scraping sound. It was coming from the attic. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but the sounds persisted. Gathering my courage, I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously approached the attic hatch. My hands trembled as I pulled the cord, and the ladder creaked down slowly. I shone the flashlight into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. As I climbed the ladder, the air grew colder. I reached the top and swept the beam of light across the attic. At first, I saw nothing but old boxes and insulation. But then, in the far corner, the light caught something metallic. I edged closer, and my blood ran cold. It was a small, makeshift bed, a pile of blankets and a pillow, with a few scattered personal items, a book, a half-empty water bottle, and a knife. Panic surged through me. Someone had been living in my attic. I scrambled down the ladder, slammed the hatch shut, and called the police. They arrived quickly, and I waited outside, shivering despite the warm night air. The officers searched the attic, but found no one. They assured me that whoever had been there was long gone and probably wouldn't return. They advised me to change the locks and secure the attic hatch. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every creak and groan of the old building set my nerves on edge. The next morning, I had the locks changed and installed a padlock on the attic hatch. Liz came back a few days later, and I told her everything. She was as freaked out as I was, but we tried to move on. A few nights later, I was home alone again. I was trying to focus on a book when I heard it, a faint scratching sound, like fingernails on wood, coming from the attic. My blood turned to ice. I listened, paralyzed with fear, as the scratching grew louder. Then, it stopped, replaced by a soft, almost inaudible whispering. Summoning every ounce of courage, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. As I waited for the police, the whispering continued, growing more frantic. When the officers arrived, they searched the attic once more, but found no one. They suggested it might be an animal, but I knew better. I never felt safe in that apartment again. Liz and I moved out a month later. To this day, the memory of those whispers haunts me, and I can't shake the feeling that something, or someone, is still watching. I've always loved antique stores, the dusty relics and the sense of history they carry. So when I found an old, ornate mirror at a local shop, I had to have it. It was beautiful, with a gilded frame and an eerie, almost hypnotic quality to the glass. I hung it in my bedroom, and for the first few days, I couldn't stop admiring it. It started subtly. I'd catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. I chalked it up to my imagination. But then, late one night, I saw her. I was getting ready for bed, brushing my hair in front of the mirror. As I looked into the glass, I saw a woman standing behind me. She was pale, with long, dark hair and hollow eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. I whipped around, but the room was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, she was gone. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, a figment of my overactive imagination. But the sightings became more frequent. Sometimes she would be standing behind me, other times she would appear to be lurking in the shadows of the room reflected in the mirror. Her presence felt malevolent, and I began to dread looking into the glass. One night, I was jolted awake by a loud bang. My heart raced as I realized the sound had come from my bedroom. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, illuminating the room. My eyes were drawn to the mirror. There she was, standing just behind my reflection, her eyes locked onto mine. This time, she smiled, a slow, menacing grin that sent chills down my spine. I couldn't move, paralyzed by fear. The woman raised a hand and pressed it against the inside of the glass. My reflection did not mimic the movement, it remained still, a terrified expression frozen on my face. Then, with a sudden, violent motion, she slammed her hand against the glass again, and the mirror cracked. I screamed, dropping my phone. The light went out, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled to turn it back on, and when I did, the woman was gone. The mirror, however, remained cracked, a jagged line running through the center. I couldn't stay in that room. I grabbed my keys and fled to my friend Sarah's house. I told her everything, and she urged me to get rid of the mirror. The next day, we went back to my apartment. Sarah was skeptical but supportive. We wrapped the mirror in a blanket and took it to a nearby junkyard. I thought that would be the end of it, but that night at Sarah's house, I had a nightmare. I was standing in front of the mirror again, and the woman was there, her hand reaching out from the crack, pulling me in. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. Sarah was already awake, staring at me with wide eyes. I saw her, she whispered. In my dream. She was here. We never spoke of it again, but I know she saw what I saw. I moved out of that apartment, but I can't escape the feeling that the woman in the mirror is still watching, waiting for her next victim. I was in high school when it happened. My parents had gone out for the evening, leaving me home alone for the first time. I was excited at the prospect of having the house to myself, imagining a night of movies and junk food. I never expected it to turn into a nightmare. It was around 10 p.m. when I first heard the noises. I was in the living room, watching TV, when I heard what sounded like footsteps upstairs. I paused the show and listened intently. The house was old, and it often creaked and groaned, but this was different. It was the distinct sound of someone walking. My heart started to race. I grabbed my phone and slowly made my way to the staircase. I called out, "Mom? Dad?" but there was no answer. The footsteps stopped. I stood there, frozen, straining to hear anything. After a few minutes of silence, I convinced myself it was just the house settling and returned to the living room. But the unease lingered. I tried to focus on the TV, but my mind kept wandering back to those footsteps. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. I cursed under my breath and grabbed my phone for light. As I made my way to the kitchen to check the fuse box, I heard a noise that made my blood run cold, the creak of a floorboard directly above me. Someone was in the house. I dialed 911, whispering my situation to the operator. They assured me that officers were on their way and told me to find a safe place to hide. I crept into the pantry and closed the door, trying to steady my breathing. My mind raced through the possibilities: a burglar, a squatter, or something worse. As I sat there in the dark, I heard the faint sound of footsteps again, this time coming down the stairs. Each step seemed to echo in the silence of the house. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were right outside the pantry door. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't open it. The doorknob rattled. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. Then, I heard a voice, low and menacing. "I know you're in there." Tears streamed down my face as I silently begged for the police to arrive. The doorknob rattled again, more violently this time. Just when I thought the intruder would break in, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The footsteps retreated, and a few moments later, I heard the front door slam. I stayed in the pantry until the police arrived, my body trembling with fear. When they finally got there, they found no sign of the intruder, but the back door was wide open. They searched the house and the surrounding area, but came up empty-handed. The police assured me that the intruder was gone, but I never felt safe in that house again. My parents installed a security system, but the damage was done. Every creak, every shadow filled me with dread. To this day, I don't know who was in my house or what they wanted. But I'll never forget the terror of those footsteps, and the voice that haunts my nightmares. "I know you're in there." "Yes, thank you," she replied, her voice tinged with relief. My car broke down, and I have no cell signal. I offered to give her a ride to the next town, and she gratefully accepted. She climbed into the passenger seat, and we continued down the highway. She introduced herself as Sarah, and we made small talk to pass the time. She seemed normal enough, but something about her story didn't quite add up. As we drove, I noticed she kept glancing at the rearview mirror, her expression tense. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to ease her obvious discomfort. "It's just, there's something you should know," she said hesitantly. "This highway is haunted." I chuckled, thinking she was trying to spook me. "Haunted, huh? By what?" "By a truck driver," she said, her voice serious. "He died in an accident on this road years ago, and now his ghost haunts the highway, looking for revenge. I raised an eyebrow. Revenge? For what? For being run off the road, she explained. He targets other drivers, trying to recreate his accident. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I brushed it off as just a scary story. Well, let's hope we don't run into him, I said lightly. We drove in silence for a while, the darkness pressing in around us. Suddenly, the temperature in the truck dropped, and my breath fogged up in the cold air. I glanced at Sarah, and she looked terrified. "He's here," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Before I could react, the headlights of a truck appeared in my rearview mirror, barreling down on us at an alarming speed. I tried to accelerate, but my truck seemed to struggle, as if some unseen force was holding it back. The other truck swerved violently, and I fought to keep control of my own vehicle. Sarah screamed, and the air filled with the sound of screeching tires and blaring horns. Just when I thought we were going to crash, the phantom truck vanished, leaving us in the deafening silence of the night. I pulled over, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Sarah was sobbing, and I tried to comfort her, but I was shaken to my core. Eventually, we made it to the next town, and I dropped her off at a diner. She thanked me and disappeared into the night. I never saw her again. To this day, I can't explain what happened on that haunted highway. Every time I drive that route, I keep an eye on the rearview mirror, fearing the return of the vengeful ghost trucker. And every time I pass the spot where it happened, I say a silent prayer, hoping I'll make it through unscathed.